Hi there. You've reached the Believer Behind the Beard podcast, and I thank you for joining us. I'm going to be talking about some interesting things, including our current status here in America and what's been going on for the past year and a half, and some of the solutions to what we see and what I see as being detrimental for our future. So get ready to take a few notes if possible, but in the meantime, sit tight. Now, America's future is in trouble, as I said, as contrasted with retaining our former traditional values along with our past exceptional founding principles and history. The American church is also in need of an earnest wake-up call and warnings due to the haunting similarities between today's church and the pre-World War II German church of the 1930s. That was during the time of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the famous German pastor who suffered under the Nazi regime. This is one of the most significant, unique crises in our nation's history. Hopefully the content of this expose and the information cited in this podcast will get your attention to the point that you will be moved to answer the call to avoid wokeness and preserve foundational American principles, as well as responding fervently as a citizen of this great nation and responding as a citizen of God's kingdom, if you're a believer. Today's cowardice by many can masquerade as godly meekness, humility, and sometimes being just gracious. However, it's time for good people to stand up to evil. What I'm about to share is exactly and absolutely true and is in need of all of our attention and responsible actions to not only be aware of ourselves, but to convey to others. Our current administrations, along with other various power brokers, have been promoting the fundamental transformation of our historical and traditional American political, societal, cultural, and moral values. They are taking advantage of our nation's current created, and I do mean created, dilemmas and vulnerabilities in order to further promote their agenda. The leftists and global idealists behind this push are using focused, communistic, Marxist strategies to divide our nation. The various American-hating victimization groups want to turn many against our American system, and that for the purpose of fundamentally changing America into a leftist utopia of their liking. The current vulnerabilities are being exploited by many, including Black Lives Matter activists, and also significantly aided by the violence of the anti-fascists, or Antifa, as you probably well heard, as well as idealistic young people, many of whom have been educated within our own academic settings, and other minority groups who feel that they are victims of our society as well, or so they've been told. These are the so-called ground troops that are being utilized by America's current politicians and bureaucrats, along with many academic, Hollywood, and media outlets whose main motivation is to see America's former self be torn down and transformed into something entirely unrecognizable from our past, and that represents their own ideals, interests, and liking. So what are the precipitants and the accelerations that have been used to promote and exercise control over this revolutionary movement we're seeing? Mainly our government has used fear to initiate unconstitutional controls within our society. Firstly, the Wuhan, China virus, or better known as COVID-19, has been overly and unnecessarily disruptive to American life, to our economy, and even to our religious liberties, as we have seen. The pandemic was also extended and kept as a significant issue due to their careful avoidance of and the disallowing of alternate proven methods for treating COVID. It has been determined by a significant number of credible medical experts that many more lives could have been saved if these other treatments would have been adopted. Additionally, the use of continuous declarations of public health emergency has given our government authorities the ability to issue controls and mandates that can be used against we the people. Additionally, starting with George Floyd's arrest and subsequent death, a huge societal outcry was initiated regarding the use of excessive police force and the so-called broad use of law enforcement authority. A much understandable emotional response was triggered by his death due to the videos shown by the media which incensed Americans. These videos were shown over and over again, and the same portions of those videos were shown over and over again. While his death may have been avoided in hindsight, I think that was entirely possible, all the untold story, the facts, and the other video footage not initially shared by the media may have been able to reduce the public outrage if it had been shown publicly. However, this outcry, led by the left media and BLM, reached the levels of anger toward the actual police perpetrators of that violence, which have now been prosecuted and punished, but also it led to outrage at all police activity, and finally to hatred and claims that all of white America is systematically racist. By the way, my own local county councilors have even started hosting multiple discussion meetings on systematic racism in our county, as per a recent article in the local newspaper. The ratcheting up of emotions, violent reactions, demands, and the lessening of crime enforcement, reduction in crime enforcement basically, have caused so many of our cities to suffer vandalism, property damage, violence, and even death at the hands of those who want to force the complete destruction of our traditional constitutional system of Americanism and replace it with some unknown political system of their liking. They've never said exactly what they want to do. On top of all their urban destruction, they destroyed monuments of disliked American history and historical figures. And they did that because those are reminders of America's past faults and to protest U.S. authoritarian oppression by past political influences. Additionally, open U.S. borders allowing millions of illegal crossings, surrender of Afghanistan to our terrorist enemies after being over there and holding that ground for 20 years. Also, irresponsible inflation resulting from irresponsible spending, and so much more is going on that I won't address in this narrative. For those of us who say, well, you know, the radical things or the revolutionary things that are going on, it can't happen here. You're dead wrong. While you may be right in that the more radical things that I've mentioned and being seen nationally are definitely coming from a minority of people, but it is apparent that many more people are either silent followers or, worse yet, silent sufferers who think, I can't do anything in opposition to all this. Well, I'm here to tell you that Christians and other we the people conservatives of similar values can make a difference. However, we can't sit on our hands on the sidelines bench-warming any longer. Your religious as well as secular freedoms and liberties, and those are God-given, I might add, are on the line right now. What I'm not trying to do is specifically tell anyone what God is wanting you to do, or specifically about what you should be doing in our nation for His glory and for your life. I certainly am not advocating anything violent or anything like that. However, if the wrong politicos gain more power beyond what we've seen, they will seek to implement this adverse American transformation, which they have not been shy about promoting for quite some time now. When that happens, then we lose. And others lose too, like our children and grandchildren. They lose an America that could be successful and provide many opportunities and benefits to its citizens still yet. This now open can of worms of political overreach, lawlessness, and violence in many big cities run by left-leaning politicos is a scourge and a gateway to more public fear and promotion of a public willingness to allow for increasing government controls. These controls include many losses of freedoms and liberties such as religious liberty, free speech, public safety protection, gun rights, etc., under the guise that this will prevent further crime escalation and other adverse consequences. Cities such as LA, Chicago, New York, Portland, Seattle, and even Memphis, and the list goes on, are all promoting non-prosecution of many criminal behaviors, little or reduced bail for many crimes, defunding and the reduction of law enforcement capabilities of police, promoting homelessness and homeless rights, reductions in property rights. The list goes on, much of which is supported by leftist mayors and George Soros elected city district attorneys who can make many legal prosecution decisions contrary to existing and beneficial state laws. These increases in U.S. city crime statistics and the accompanying public fear produced will cause continued chaos with the intent to bring in federal level policing and more legal mandates from the federal government in lieu of having local jurisdictional controls and oversights dealing with criminal activities, which is really unwanted and welcomed. The cities are where these activities should be dealt with at the city level. Because of all this, you should be very concerned about who and what you've been supporting. If you consider yourself currently, say, a Democrat, a progressive, a socialist, an anti-fascist, like Antifa, or even a communist. Some of these folks consider themselves woke and intellectually oriented anti-capitalist and anti-nationalistic Americans. To counter that confusion, I strongly recommend that you take time to watch a video on this subject, and it's presented on YouTube by Dinesh D'Souza when he spoke at the Young America's Foundation summer gathering in August of 2020, this last couple of years. Dinesh is a U.S. constitutionally based conservative Christian and a pro-traditionalist American, East Indian immigrant, that's quite a mouthful, who clearly defines the difference between the political right and left, and it presents this difference and how to tell the difference in his video. You can find it by doing a YouTube search entitled Academia, Hollywood, and the Media by Dinesh D'Souza. Very worth listening to, and I think it'll give you a lot of insight into how to define these different groups. The solution to this American downward spiral and intended national transformation is by the current leftists in charge, and for you to use your vote and your First Amendment rights to tell others about removing all current politicos who are the party of the left and leftist supporters. Now again, I'm saying that is the solution. But not only remove them, but replace them with those who are U.S. constitutionally based America First leaders. At the moment, the Democrat Party has been taken over exclusively by those who do not have a traditional American future in their plans and will support many anti-America First policies. Once that transformation has taken place, freedom won't be coming back. If you agree with the things I say and I speak of, then do your part to avoid the further deterioration of our nation. James 4:17 says, "Therefore, to one who knows the right thing to do and does not do it, to him it is sin." And Proverbs 21:3 says, "To do what is right and just is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice." And I might add, and maybe make it more contemporary, I would say it's more acceptable than being involved in many church activities and church attendance. Well, there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm afraid it's going to go beyond that in order to get things on the right road. And I suggest we all ask for and follow God's directions regarding these things in our life. So, having never encouraged my listeners to do this, but please post any of your comments on this or other Believer Behind the Beard videos so that your thoughts and opinions can be heard. Also hit subscribe to the Believer Behind the Beard videos. This will allow you to receive notification when new podcasts become posted and become available. And as a point of interest, our next podcast will bring video highlights along with my observations and comments regarding my recent trip to that beautiful and awesome country of Iceland. And I've talked to a lot of people there, both long-term residents and new immigrants, and there's a lot happening there, and it's very interesting, and there's a lot of good things that I see there that have a lot of potential for people to exercise their industriousness and their freedom. So now I'd like you to stay tuned to our podcast musical message that's going to be by myself and my associate, and I want you to continue to always have your heart and mind open to God and always seek the truth. See you next time.
The musical selection for today's podcast is Neil Young's 1989 song, Rocking in the Free World. The lyrics emphasize his disdain for various unhealthy aspects of American culture as he saw it then. However, when we look closely at the evils that he is pointing out in this song, we find they are all a result of anti-Christ and politically left-leaning values and policies that always end up having negative and dire societal consequences. Hopefully someday all will realize the true sources of the evil we see and the solution for sin that Jesus Christ has provided, and that is available to all. Following will be another musical selection that will serve as our response to the issues and problems brought up by Neil Young's song. This song is titled, I Am the Resurrection, and the song is sung from Jesus' perspective, saying that he who believes in me, Jesus, will lead a new life and never die. We hope you enjoy. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Shoes. But there's a warning sign on the road ahead. There's a lot of people saying we'd be better off dead. Don't feel like Satan, but I am to them. So I try to forget it any way I can. Keep on rocking in the free world. Keep on rocking in the free world. Styrofoam boxes for the ozone layer. Got a man in the people, says keep hope alive. Got fuel to burn, got roads to drive. Keep on rocking the free world. I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will never die. I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live a new life. I have come to bring the truth. I have come to bring you life. If you believe, then you shall live. I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will never die. I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live a new life. In my word, all men will come to know. It is love which makes the Spirit grow. If you believe, then you shall live. I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will never die. I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live a new life. He who receives me is made new in Christ.
Amen. There's your answer to many of life's problems. All of them.
Yeah.